Hey, good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about automatic R Bioconductor code formatting using a bunch of tools, format, lintr, styler, biocds, and air. Um, Over here you can find the notes, as usual. So there's a bunch of packages that you might want to install in this session, but also at some point you're going to have to install some software outside of R for being able to use air. So I'll open that link over here at the beginning. It's available for macOS and Linux as well as Windows. And basically, they provide here some commands that you can run on your terminal window. In this case, for Mac and Linux, it downloads a shell file and then executes that shell file, which will basically download the compiled version of Air to your computer. Um, all right. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about code styles and why you might be interested in formatting your code. So first of all, we have this Bioconductor coding style guide. It's fairly short. It says basically, please use 4 spaces for indenting. Don't use the tab symbol. Don't have lines longer than 80 characters. Some of these things, they're about being like consistent and being able to make sure that other people can understand, evaluate, and debug your code easier. That is, if we make code a bit like more human readable, we provide like spaces for breathing. That's like Jenny Bryan has a presentation where she talks about that concept of like spacing code is like allows you to breathe and understand things. Basically, when you use a common syntax, then it'll be easier to understand code that someone else wrote because you'll be familiar with that syntax already. You don't get really any points for writing like one-liner one-line code that like does a lot of things in a single line with a bunch of functions, and maybe that one line is like 200 characters long. That doesn't really help you. Um, um, so besides indentation, um, using space, so like having spaces after commas is useful. Um, Having spaces before and after binary operators is also useful. They also say here that like for arguments, you should not use spaces around the equal signs. I actually do like having spaces around the equal signs, um, just to differentiate the name of the argument versus the actual content of the argument. But I mean, that's the Bioconductor coding style. They do recommend using 2 pound signs to start full line comments. That's something I do use a lot myself. And to make sure that you indent the same level of code as the surrounding code. So making sure that indentation, I guess, signals whether you're like inside of a function, let's say, or inside of an if, or outside of it. Make it a little bit easier to orient yourself at what level of the code you're in. They also say like comments should be for clarification, documentation. Basically, don't leave code inside of comments, and avoid using to-dos in your comments. At the end, they say like, well, you might want to use the formatR package for formatting, as well as Hadley Wickham's R style guide. Hadley Wickham, that R style guide that Hadley initially started, has now become the tidyverse code style. So you'll see here like style.tidyverse.org. That's the same URL that if I mouse over here that we get, which is style tidyverse.org. This website, this little book actually, is actually much longer than the Bioconductor coding style. It talks about how do you how to organize your files, syntax, pipes, and a bunch of other things. Before we get into that, though, it says it acknowledges that all style guides are fundamentally opinionated, and they, there's some of the recommendations here are based on the preferences of the people who wrote the guide, but they are to make code easier. And yes, some of these decisions are going to be arbitrary. And in the end, they say like, well, two R packages that support this are the styler package as well as the lintr package. So we're going to cover those packages too today. Now, in terms of files or styling files, we've seen this in other parts. So we've seen this idea of using number prefixes for files such that like they can be sorted in the order that is informative for people to know about, instead of being sorted by the actual names, like let's say the letters, which maybe doesn't make sense. So this is like good organization. This is bad organization over here. Like if you have things that are date dependent, then use the date as the prefix of the file name. So there's quite a few comments here about organization of files. But in terms of syntax here, they have some comments about how to name objects. But then once we get into code, again, they talk about spacing. So it's like, please use spaces after commas. Don't use it before. So like, these are all examples of something that would be bad, right? So let me collect some of these bad examples. Over here on
Excuse me that a bit, Leo. Thank you.
Cool. They also say like, don't put spaces inside or outside of parentheses. So here, like this they don't like because it separates the beginning of the function from the name of the function. So they would prefer if you don't have a space there. Then this one over here they don't like either because I guess I don't know. I guess they find it a little bit confusing to have that space before the first argument or after the last argument. Some of that is also like simplified by having rainbow parentheses in RStudio or your IDE of preference. They also have this thing where like they say like it's bad to not have a space after the if or for or while keywords for code flow control. And then also it's bad not to have a space before the curly bracket over here. So these are some of the things that they've implemented that they say that are bad examples. There's quite a few more, right? So let's just collect some of them over here. This one it's fairly easy to see because there's like no spaces in the operators, so it makes it hard to like know what is the order of operations being performed there, like the math operations. One thing they talk about here is vertical space. Don't have a lot of vertical space. If you can, just like make it such that it basically separates your thoughts, like paragraphs, but don't like overuse it either. Let's see. This long function call is a very, very common example. a lot of actually the default RStudio settings foment this, which is like the lines after a long function call with this parenthesis open are indented to that to match the position of that opening parenthesis. But then that makes your code highly dependent on the length of the function names. So that's not as good as this other example over here, where like you open the parentheses and then here you have like name arguments with the actual values. But like more importantly than that, like we only use the same indentation level to say like we're inside a function call. So this is one that I will see quite a lot. Cool. So you'll see a lot of these you probably recognize a lot of these situations where you're writing code in this way. It's all valid R code. But there's a bunch more examples in this tidyverse style. They even I know a lot of you use the pipe symbol. At the end of the pipe section, they say that it's bad to use the McGreeder pipe. It's best to use the base R pipe. That's because the base pipe provides basically all of the features that they actually recommend using. Although like the McGreeder pipe probably can do other things too that the base R pipe can't. So I thought it would be good to highlight that. So there's a lot of other things in this style guide. I'm not going to cover the full contents of it. But once you've convinced yourself that like using the writing code, following a style guide is going to be useful not only for you, but for sharing your code with others. As they say on the Bioconductor style guide, like make it easier for other people to understand, evaluate, and debug your code. The challenge with all of these style guides is that it's hard to be perfect. It's hard to remember all these things and to write code that way. Sometimes when you're deep in thought on how to solve a problem, you're not going to remember some of these decisions from these recommendations for styling code. And then if you, let's say you are detail oriented and like do use some of these style guides, then and someone else shares code to you that is not following the style guide, you might like spend a lot of time thinking about how to style that person's code. So that's where like packages that do this for you come into play. The very first one was formatR, or the first one I knew of. There might have been other ones before that. formatR was developed by Jihui Xie, who's the author of lintr, R Markdown, many other packages that end with a down suffix, and other things. So formatR, once you install it, the idea is that you have some code over here and you want to reformat it so we'll like follow some style guide. Well, it has like an app over here, a Shiny app, where you can paste some code and it will return to you like nicely formatted code. It has a few options. You can, for example, replace the assignment operator from equal to arrow. You can do a few things like how many spaces you want for indentation, what is the maximum line width. All of that looks pretty nice. However, you have to then copy your code manually to this website and then copy it back. That seems a little bit of a pain. You could also use functions though, like this tidyval function, where inside of it you paste your code and it will return like nicely formatted code. So that's like the tidyval function over there. So it has quite a few things that formatR can do for you. Um, so and you can also set like a lot of global options, like, well, how many spaces do you want for indentation? Indentation, right? So here we want 4 of them. You want. So it's quite useful as a package. You could also use the tidy source function, which will take as input a file. So if you have a file of interest that you're interested in tidying, we can use that tidy source. So let me just exemplify that here with this code file. So we're going to use formatR tidy source code.r. And so if I run that over here, the output of it is our code over here on the left that was not well formatted and now has been correctly formatted. So like lines 2, 3, and 4 for like the spaces are like all over the place, now having all of them uniformly set to the same format. These 2 bad examples have also been corrected. This one about the if has the correct spacing, etc. So it basically did a lot of things in a nice way, right? But now I would need to like copy paste the output of this into my code.r file and update it. So formatR is quite useful. Actually, since it's quite useful, actually, RStudio basically uses formatR by default. So if you have an R script, you can select a few lines of code in RStudio. You click on the 1, which is the Code Tools menu. You have this reformat selection option. Behind the scenes, this is actually using formatR or like code inspired by formatR to actually reformat code. So you might have already been relying on formatR with actually knowing about it, thanks to this one reformat selection option that we have on RStudio. So I've been using that a lot myself. Now, as we saw on the tidyverse style guide, they highlight 2 other packages, styler and lintr. So they say on that website that lintr performs automatic checks to confirm that your code conforms to the style guide. And so that was developed by Jim Hester and others. There's a bunch of authors here that we can see. Florent, Russ, Michael, Kuhn, Alexander, Indrajit, and others. And I even have a little video here where they run the function lint on a bad R script, and then you get a bunch of messages telling you like what are the things that are wrong with that script. So here like you get a bunch of warnings, style things, and so this is one way of checking if your code is mostly looking okay, or if you're violating like the style guides in some ways that are like error level warnings, error level messages, warnings, or just like notes, which is the style over here. So that's if you want to learn, I guess, what you could be doing a bit better. But once you've noticed all of those things, you can manually go and edit your files and try to make sure that your code is now looking compliant with the style guide. Or you can use the styler package, the formatR package, to actually automatically do it for you. But if you want to use lintr, you can use it on, there's a few different functions here. You can like do it on a full project where you lint the directory, or an ARP package. These will like detect files that should be linted versus those that shouldn't. And then you have a bunch of options for setting some of the defaults. Now, Jim Hester was he was the main developer at the beginning of rlib actions, which is a GitHub Actions support provided by Posit or RStudio. So one of the very first things that he worked on was a set of GitHub Actions that basically run lintr for you every time you make a commit. So you get like a report of basically how your code is looking in your either in a project or like in a package. So it's quite useful if you want to get like these type of warnings and messages, so you can learn what are things that you could be doing better in the sense of complying with the style guides that you've chosen to follow. It has a lot of options, and in general, I don't actually use it because I just blindly go and automatically style my code with styler or other tools. So what is styler? So in a sense, it's kind of like the next generation of formatR. It was made by Kirill and Lawrence and other authors. He has also this nice little logo. And it has functions such as like style package, style file, style text, where you give it a file name or like a full directory where you have a bunch of package functions, and it will automatically style them for you. So and it tries to implement basically the tidyverse style guide. So if we go over here to RStudio, once you have installed styler, you go to add-ins under S. I have a bunch of packages that have add-ins over here. Under S, we see styler, and you can style either the selection or the full active file. So let me select, for example, those lines. I'll go to styler and style selection, and it automatically styled it and updated the code for me. So it's a little bit better in that sense than formatR, where you have to run it and manually copy the output of it back. Styler already does all of that for you. So let me undo that and just style the active file. That does the whole thing. Now it will do some things a little bit different from formatR. So if I select everything with Command A, then press Command Shift A, which is the keyboard shortcut for reformat selection. This is using formatR, and then after that, I can also still use styler, style active file, and you'll notice that it changed a few things. Right, if I undo it and redo it, we can see that it changed some of these indentations from 2 to 4. So there are some differences there, right? Why is that? That's because behind the scenes, I've configured a styler to use the this bias style function. That's sorry, I had that much later, I think. Yeah. So on my R profile, I have this line over here that says like, I want to use this specific transformer, which is defined in the bias package. The bias style function says like we want 4 spaces instead of 2. That's to follow the Bioconductor style guidelines. So that works pretty nicely. It's actually something that we have on the bias package too. Like under the the dev 04 update files that BioCDs will create for you. I have all these lines, which are like style package. We want to style the full package. We also want to style the directory, the dev directory. We want to style the directory where we have the vignettes, all of the RMD vignettes. We also want to style the README file that we have on a package. So these lines 15 to 22 are lines that I have been recommended to a bunch of people through the BioCDs package by including them in the 04 update R script, which contains lines of code that you might frequently want to be running on your packages, such as automatically styling your code, then updating your documentation files, and sometimes also updating your README markdown file by re-rendering the README RMD file. So since these commands take a bit of time to remember, I have them on this script such that I can easily execute them without having to remember the full, these full lines of code. Cool. So some of you might have been using styler in this way, and I've taught a few people in the past how to use the add-in, which is just this add-in styler style active file thing that we just saw. So let me undo a lot of these changes that we did to code.r to get it into the bad state. So all of that are sets of tools that already existed. Now, styler has been around for a few years, and at some point I even recommended it over formatR, and I made a pull request to the BioCcheck package explaining how to use styler and how to use it too. And there were already some comments before how you can use the formatR package. So the official documentation of BioCcheck recommends styler at this point, but also mentions formatR. So this is the package that checks new packages in Bioconductor. And that's the documentation that it will suggest for implementing that style guide. So here you can see that this was done on pull request number 57 a while back. We've covered, I guess, the origin of style guides and tools that can help you automatically style your code. Now, the reason why I wanted to do this session today is because there's a new tool called AIR. AIR has been built on top of the styler package, but it's not built with R. It's built with something else, and it's currently in beta. Now, the idea of AIR is that it can work with different R editors. So not just RStudio, but I know some of you like to use VS Code. Maybe some of you are using Positron already, and like NeoVim and Helix. Let's look at the RStudio section. So you have to have a recent version of RStudio. Then you need to install the AIR command line tool, which we saw earlier today. For Mac, it's like you copy paste this command on your terminal. I'll do it again myself just to show it. And then it says like, it's downloading AIR version 0.4.1. And then it installed it on my computer. This is my username in my Mac computer under the .local directory bin. So we look what we have there on my computer. We'll see that we have AIR. And then if I run AIR with a capital V option, we can see that that's a version that I have. If I run it without that, with a V, we see like all the command line tools for it. This air command, software has a command called format, which will then format a set of files or directories. Now, the way you configure this in RStudio is you go to Tool Global Options, and then we're going to go to the Code section, and then we're going to click on Formatting. So I'm going to do it on my RStudio window. Tools, Global Options, Code, Formatting. And you can say you want to use no external formatting. So that basically means you want to use the formatR tools that are implemented in RStudio. Maybe you want to use a styler package, and you can decide whether to use the strict transformers or not. And then for using air, you can say like, I want to use an external tool. In order to use an external tool, you have to actually give it the command that you're going to be running. So in this case, you have to locate where air is installed in your computer, put a space after that, then use the format command. So that's what I'm going to use over here. I'm going to click OK to these options. I'll be using air for the next tests. So that's something you can do there. So like if I select code now and reformat selection, these will actually be using the air tools for doing so, instead of what we had before. Now, something else that I didn't realize existed already was that if you go to Tools Global Options, under Code Saving, there's this option over here, Reformat Documents and Save. So if we enable that, this will reformat, every time you save a file, it's going to automatically reformat after it. You click Save. So I'll select OK here. So now that if I save this file, Command S, we see that it gets reformatted automatically. So it happens pretty fast. I'm going to undo it. You can see here code.r has a little asterisk, which means that the file hasn't been saved. If I press here the save icon or type Command S on my computer, it saves and then it automatically gets reformatted. So this tool, these options, you can use it with like, styler or like the built-in formatting tools that RStudio has, or with air. So with any of them, you can set this up. Now, this is pretty nice because if you do this, you don't have to think about running these sets of lines of code of like styler, style package, style dir, etc., or style active files. You don't have to use the add-ins to go and like say like styler, style active file, or command here and say like reformat the selection or reformat the document. You don't have to do that anymore, right? So you have to think less, I guess, and always reformat code. So I've been testing this for like a month or a month and a half, and overall I've been pretty happy with like just reformatting code on save. You could, if you prefer, to go to global options, code saving. Don't enable that globally. But then per file, you can go and say like, I do want to reformat this document on save. So you can configure it per file on RStudio. So here, even though we have it turned off globally, since it's active on this file, once I save it, it does get reformatted. I'm gonna undo that and now just save. And this is basically the default scenario where it doesn't get saved. Cool. So those are some options from RStudio that can be quite nice. Now, Air has a few configuration options. They're quite short in terms of options. If you look at the styler documentation, there's a lot of things you can configure with styler. With Air, it's a lot simpler. So one of them is like, what is the line width that you want? Another one is how many spaces do you want? Do you want 2 or do you want 4? Whether you want to use the space symbol or some other symbol. What do you want to do with like line endings? Basically, do you want to add like an empty line at the end? This thing about persistent line breaks. You can also say like, I want to have a set of files that I want to exclude. You can think about it as a git ignore file. That's actually the analogy that they use in the documentation. So you can specify a list of files that you want to ignore and not run styler on, Air on. And you can say like the default exclude. If you set it to true, it's going to ignore this set of files that probably you don't want to automatically reformat. And that's because in some of these scripts, the syntax is really already really important, and some spaces and all of that are really important. And so maybe these are files you don't want to deal with. So I think it's best to have that option set to true. All of these options that we saw at the top are the default values for all of these things. And the way you specify Air to use them is that you create a file called air.toml. And it's going to work a little bit like our project files, or like Git directories that are recognized by the here package. Basically, you can if you have it inside of a project, then any files in that project are going to be formatted using the options that you specify in air.toml. You have it at your user level directory, then like basically everything that you code in your computer is going to be affected by that air.toml. So as an example, so here my computer, right now I don't have an air.toml file at my user level directory. So I'm gonna make one. Yeah, let me save it. So right, you can see here the contents of it. So I basically have all of the default options. I did add this git ignore file on exclude, and then I changed the inlet width to 4 instead of 2. Let me remember if I'm saving. Let me reformat documents and save. Then I'm gonna save the file. I guess I need to just make a small edit, save it. Oh, that's because I turned off the reformat document and save. Cool. So now it did run it, and you can see here that it's actually using 4 spaces. I'm going to do that. Go back to my TOML file, make it so it uses. Let's use 8 just to highlight how that can be really different. So here, once I change that to 8, is actually using the settings that I have in my user level air TOML file. Cool. So let me do that. Go back to just 4 and save it. So all of this works pretty well. Now Air is pretty new. and I noticed a little problem, which is I had a git ignore file where I had like a prefix, asterisk, a suffix. And if I save that file, it reformats it and breaks it and adds spaces. And so that basically breaks the syntax of my git ignore. And I was almost about to add like a bunch of files that I didn't want to add that I originally had ignored. And I was like, what's happening? And then I realized that air was actually breaking this. So air has some options for skipping formatting. So you want to disable it. You can add a comment that says #FMT for format : skip. So that will skip the next section that you have. Or you could say like actually just skip the full file. So I'm gonna paste this into my git ignore. And then once I save it, then it doesn't actually reformat it. This sounds a little bit painful for me to actually remember to use on your git ignore files if you're using a syntax like this with prefix and suffix. So I did end up making I did make an issue yesterday documenting this on the error repository. So that's hopefully something that they're going to address in the future. As noted, air is in beta, so like breaking changes are expected, and like edge cases are also expected that they might not be solved yet by air. Now, when with any of these tools that you end up deciding to use, there's a question of how to best share the formatting settings. This question is related to the concept of, well, we want to auto format code because we want to make it easier for other people working with us to understand the code that we're generating, right? Now, I think like as a team, if you know you're working in a team and the team decides to use some of these tools, then people can set some of these options at the user level in their computers or their home directories at you know, JHPC and stuff at their compute cluster. So for styler, I already showed how you can edit your R profile and say like, hey, I want to set this option for styler, and I want to use this thing, right? You can basically do the same thing for formatR, which we saw earlier. formatR has these options that you can also specify on an R profile. R profile files can exist at the user level, but they can also exist at a project level. So you can always decide to have more than one R profile for that. That's one option. So that basically is the same thing you can do for styler as well as formatR using the R profile files. With air, we just saw that you can actually have an air configuration file on your user level directory rather than have it per project. So it's you know, similar to our profile, but it has a new name. Now, a little bit of a challenge of having it per project is that we saw recently on a recent Bioconductor package review that they don't want you to have some of these configuration files. So we had a codecov YAML file, a package down YAML file, and they did not want us to have them. So I mean, here there's a bunch of messages. Yeah, so this is where they say like, please remove all files. Example, codecov and package down. That's an open discussion that I'm trying to promote in the Bioconductor community, where I argue that like it should be okay to have some of these configuration files, but from their point of view, they don't want to have these things that like are files that are not really core to a package, and they don't want to have to check if any of these files have like invalid code or some dangerous code that could be doing something to a person's computer. So that's, I think, their point of view. And so after all of this, I will encourage people to give, I think Air is probably like one of the easier tools, but in general, I would encourage people to try the global option of code, saving, reformat documents, and save. Whether you're using the internal tools from RStudio, the styler package, or the external formatting with Air. I would recommend that for people to give that a try. Basically, like the one thing I'm trying to configure that is different between the tidyverse style guide versus the Bioconductor one is the indent width. In the tidyverse style guide, they recommend 2 spaces. In Bioconductor, they recommend 4. I've gotten so used to having 4 spaces over the years that that's the option I really prefer. And my eyes are used to that, I guess. Sometimes with 2 spaces I find it a little bit hard to make sure are you indenting or not, right? With 4 is like visually easier to notice. Cool. So yeah, all these tools have been really useful to me over the years. When I started, there was a different website that listed all the Bioconductor coding style recommendations, and I was trying to follow them like manually, and it wasn't always that easy to do. When formatR came into scene, I really enjoyed using it. But then actually when it became part of RStudio, I was like, oh, that's a lot easier. You can just use one reformat selection. I was pretty happy with that. But it's one thing having to reformat one file at a time. With the styler package, you can actually reformat a bunch of files almost, you know, basically pretty fast with the commands that we just saw over here. So since 2020, I think I've been using the styler package a lot to reformat files like this. A lot of times people will submit a pull request to some of the packages that I maintain, and after the merging the pull request, I'll run styler to like reformat the code automatically. So that's something that I've been using quite a bit, and I think in the future I'll be using both styler and Air. Styler to like basically reformat a bunch of files without having to open them one by one, and then Air for like my more day-to-day active reformatting. And it's nice to see that Air was designed to actually run with different editors. We have a few people in the team that use different editors. So this might be one way of making sure that our code looks the same regardless of what editor we're using, without having to force people to use one editor over another. So cool. So that's all I have for today, and I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you very much.